Thank you for choosing to watch this video. In it, I'll be tying a variation of Craig Macdonald's Duracell Nymph. I call it a variation as I believe the original had a tail of pink angel hair. Start off by fitting your bead to the hook and mounting your hook in the vise. The thread I'm using to tie this fly is Semperfli Nano Silk. It's a nice strong thread and it lends itself well to splitting, which we'll need later in this fly. So catch on your thread, build up a little bulk behind the bead to hold it in place. You don't have to go too far with that, we can build up bulk as we build up the body of the fly. Trim off your waste thread. You notice I just use the edge of the scissors against the tension thread. Just trying to make sure the bead doesn't move about too much. And to try and keep a sun profile on the fly, I'll catch in the tail at this point and bind it down as I create the underbody. So select a small bunch of cotyledon fibres from the feather, pull them parallel before you rip them off to try and keep the tips aligned. Measure for length, catch in behind the bead. As I tie down the tail fibres, I'm holding the free end under a little tension above the hook to keep the fibres in place on the top of the hook. Next we're going to catch in the rib, which is a red wire. You want to make sure you catch the rib in for the full length of the body to maintain an even underbody and help build the profile. If you're not happy with where the rib's sitting, don't be afraid to go back and reposition it, tie it in again. Good to try and keep the rib in the same position along the length of the body. Once you're happy, make sure you catch it in right up to the bead, and here I double back the waste end of the tail fibres just to give me a neater cut off point and helps build up some bulk behind the bead, and also keeps the profile building the way we want for the end of the fly. Right, tidying up, making sure the bead's secure at this point because it'll get messy if we try and do it after we start dubbing the body. Take your thread back down to the tail of the fly so we can start dubbing the body, making sure we've got a nice slim profile and even underbody. The dubbing used for the body of this fly is Hen's UV Ice Dub in brown. So it's quite an unusual colour, it has a purplish tint and looks very nice. It's quite a coarse dubbing and dubs quite easily. As always with dubbing, less is more. You want to try and use as little as possible so you've got good control over the shape of the fly and the profile. And it's always easier to add a bit more if you need to. As you build the body, keep tightening up your dubbing rope. This will help you control the profile and make for a neater fly. Dub the body up, leaving a little space behind the bead for the collar. Tidy up any really loose straggly bits and then rib your fly in sort of open turns. 4 or 5 turns of rib should be fine. Catch in your wire, make sure it's securely in and helicopter off, gives you a nice clean break. Now I'm preparing the CDC feather for the collar. Select your feather and you try and run your fingers down the barb of the feather to make sure all the barbels are standing at 90 degrees. Clear off the fluff. I'm using a complete feather in this one, and we'll catch in one side with a clip. There are various clips on the market that you could use that all function in a very similar way. As I mentioned, I'm using a full feather here, but it's collars for flies. It's ideal if you have feathers that you've been using to tie, say, shuttlecock wings. If you keep the thicker waste bits at the bottom, you can use the fibres left on there for collars like this. To split the thread, if you spin your bobbing anti-clockwise, the thread should lie flatter and be easier to split. It can still be a bit footery, especially on a thin thread like the nano silk. I could have used a slightly thicker nano silk and made my life easier, but the beauty with nano silk is it's so strong that even the thin versions have plenty of strength for this technique. Once you've got the thread split, insert your finger and then the clamp to put the CDC fibres in. As you can see, you don't need a lot to make the collar. Then remove your finger and spin the thread. It takes quite a lot of spinning, and I find that once you've spun it a lot, if you run your finger up the thread, it will force the twist to twist up through the CDC fibres, as you can see. It's worth picking out any fibres that are getting tangled too much with your dubbing needle. Once you're happy, wind on the collar using your fingers to pull back the fibres so we don't trap too many in against the bead. You don't want an overly heavy collar. Looks about right. And next we'll finish off the fly with a small collar of peacock ice dub. Again, you only need a very little dubbing for this, and make sure the rope is nice and tight. Then I'll apply some of my UV resin to the thread before I whip finish. This saves it getting messy and soaking into too many of the materials already on the fly. As I whip finish, I'll try and keep the thread against the bead so it doesn't put the UV resin into the peacock ice dub too much. Set the resin with your torch before trimming the thread. And once again, cut the thread off with the blade of the scissor against the tension thread. This gives a nice clean cut. And then just have a little look round the fly, tidy up any overly long CDC fibres if you want. And that's us done. Again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like it and subscribe to my channel. As always, any comments or feedback are greatly appreciated.